Hi, I'm Erica Burry, Director of Outdoor Sylvania Community Parks, and I'm here at the greenhouse at Sylvan Prairie Park, the perfect location to introduce our newest podcast in our Nature in Your Backyard series. We're going to be talking about native plants, how we grow them, where we put them in our parks, and how you can implement them into your own landscaping. I have some wonderful guests and from the community. I'm excited for you to meet them. We had a great conversation, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. So I've got some awesome guests and ready to get started and plant some plants and have some fun. First of all, let me introduce Dawson Howard. Dawson Howard has recently been appointed as our facilities manager. He's actually been working for the parks for about 7 years. Is that about right, Dawson? I'll let him talk about himself a little bit more later, but very excited to have him on board. Over here across from me is Kate Mason-Wolf. Kate has been really active in native plants, making sure we have the ones that we need in our natural areas, keeping track of them, counting them, and then also really active in Wild Ones, which is a native landscaping group that we have a chapter of in Northwest Ohio. It's the Oak Openings chapter. Wild Ones is a really great organization. We'll talk a little bit more about your role, Kate, and what kind of stuff they're doing, but it's really great for getting lay people, quote unquote, involved in native plant landscaping. So excited to be talking to you about that. And then our last guest here is Olivia Nago. And I know Olivia because of my husband, Todd, who you all met at the last episode. I'm really excited to have you here, Olivia, to kind of talk about what got you interested in native plants and then how the small business thing is going for you. So exciting. So that's our plan for today. Stick around and you've got lots of fun things to talk about. Thank you, Dawson, for bringing us some plants. We were hoping to film this segment or episode really in our greenhouse, but weather was iffy, so we decided to move it into the Gorman room, which is where we do our educational programming here at Old Acre Park. So Dawson's got some things set up for us to work on. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what we've got and what we're doing?
Absolutely. So these plants we are growing for the Wild Ones sale that is happening in May. They are New England asters. They're a fantastic native species that we have around in this area. They get beautiful purple flowers and they bloom for a very long time. So we're going to be bumping these for the sale. So right now they're in they're in pints, and we'll be bumping them up into quarts so the roots have more space to grow, and then they become bigger plants. And so that is what we'll be doing.
So here's a funny thing is I haven't ever done this part because Todd brings plants home. He just throw them in the ground. So my job is getting them in the ground, not bumping them up.
Sure. Okay. I mean,
give me a little bit of a tutorial.
I will absolutely do that. So I'll take my cord here. I'll just fill it with just a little bit of soil. You know the plant's ready to be bumped when you can flip it over and you get some nice roots. So I can see that we're getting a little bit of root bounds. They're getting a little discoloration.
Yeah.
So they're ready to be bumped. It's just a nice fresh soil. So I break them up just a little bit, nothing too crazy, and then I just put them in my pot. I don't like to have too much air down there. I don't want the roots to be able to dry out or whatnot. And I just give it a nice little bump, and then he's ready to go.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Dawson. Olivia is with us today because she's a recent graduate of the University of Toledo. And that's how I met her because, again, my husband, Todd, is in environmental sciences department. And so Olivia was one of his students. So Olivia, can you tell us about how your experience at UT got you excited about native plants and kind of how that moved into where you are now?
Of course. So I decided to study environmental science once I decided to go to the University of Toledo because my dad is a farmer and he taught me all my life how important we learned it is for all of us, not just farmers, right? And so I knew I wanted to do something to protect the earth, but I didn't know what. And I trusted the process that I would figure that out as I go. And I was also determined to get a little personal. In high school, I was very shy, very quiet. Okay, I said, I'm not going to do that when I get to college. I'm going to talk. And a lot of for you. Thank you. I try, yes. And a lot of people, I started in 2020, COVID. So a lot of people hated all online classes. I just rocked. I could hide my face. I could talk over the computer. So it actually ended up helping me.
Give you luck.
Exactly right. So by the time we were back in person, I wasn't shy anymore. So the other thing I was determined to do was to not be a number while I was in college. So I decided that after every class, I was going to go up to professors and talk to them so they would remember me. And I might have annoyed them at the time, but they remember me now. Every one of them does. And one of those professors was Dr. Todd Crail. He has a lot of the freshman classes in environmental science. Of course, he's the native plant guy, as I like to call him, for this area. And he was teaching the class about that. I would stay after and talk with him about that. Before going to college, I had no interest in gardening. I was out in the field with my dad. I wasn't in a farm with my mom.
Is your dad on a farm?
We do some wheat, soybeans, but mostly hay.
Okay.
So, for horses.
Yeah.
So, very different than just a traditionally grown crop farm.
Sure.
Again, that's why I take so much pride in coming from that background. So, Tom teaches about native plants, how much lower maintenance they are once you get them established and everything. I was like, well, this sounds fantastic. I should start implementing some of those in our yard. So, I would go home and rip all my mom's flowers out. So, said that to Todd. I was like, where are you supposed to get them if you miss the sale days? Somebody should have a greenhouse that's open year, the whole season, a retail greenhouse. And he's like, so I've been trying to have somebody do that for years. I said, well, I'll go ahead and do it. So that winter, my parents bought me my first greenhouse for Christmas. Small 8x12 little greenhouse.
Okay.
And that's where Liv's Native Nursery started. I had a hand-painted sign on top of it and everything. And the goal was always to become retail, wholesale, things like that. And then I ended up joining the Michigan Native Plant Guild. It was like a student work with runners and landscapers who prioritize native plants. I told to get in, I had to do an interview.
Sure.
And I told them how our goal was to be a retail nursery. And they said, we do not know of a single other greenhouse in Michigan. It's a retail nursery. If they're all wholesale or a few sale days and things like that. Yeah. And I told them my mission and I wanted to make it, as easily accessible as possible. And they were really excited about that. I now know that there's one other one up in Traverse City. So we're the second. Still proud.
Yeah, no, you should be. That's super exciting. I know just from personal, again, my husband is South, so he's never really had any issue getting native plants for our yard.
Right.
And he famously moved an entire garden from his house to my house when we moved in together. So, no. Oh, no. I ended up with lots of prickly pear where I didn't really. So anyway, it's that's been a classic issue, right? We did have a grower in Toledo that provided plants for plant sale and other things like that, but when she left, that was kind of it.
Right.
So we're really excited that you're doing it, and you're not the only one, but I think you're the one that's probably got it as a this is my future business. Sure, yeah, but other folks are doing a little bit on hobby stuff, but the more the merrier, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
More course.
Exactly. Yeah. We don't have a shop or a greenhouse you can go to.
Right.
8 and 7.
And that was the goal because I grew up going to a traditional greenhouse.
Yeah.
And that's how I knew you bought plants. So you kind of baffled me about there's only a few sale days to get these things.
Right.
And I wanted to make it more accessible to those people who didn't go shop at the traditional greenhouse. And we have. That has definitely been something we've seen. People will just happen upon us. So we just Google greenhouses nearby, and then I get the joy of educating them from what natives are.
Yeah.
And then they buy some. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how's the small business aspect of things going? I mean, I am the director of a park district without a business degree. My background, I think I've said before, is natural resources. So I had to learn a lot of how to run a small business on the fly. So how's that going? Being able to get some good mentoring and
yes. Yeah. I definitely don't have a business degree either.
Yeah, for sure. Playing the flower. Yes. Make a living.
Well, both my parents have their own small businesses as well. So
okay.
And they both started out, working traditional jobs, and then they both were fortunate enough to start their own businesses. I saw how tough that is to work a 9-to-5 traditional office job. Yeah, that's not what I wanted to do. So that was part of why I went to school for environmental science, and then it just kind of, like I said, naturally led into starting my own business. We all kind of work for each other, and then we'll talk a little later. I have insurance now and everything.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yes. Yeah. I won't lie. Those first couple of years weren't easy. There's still things now that we have trouble with and stuff because it's a lot more serious now. If something dies, that's your money that's gone.
Exactly.
So there was a lot of mistakes made and lessons learned because of those mistakes. And I'm working on getting better at seeing it as a lesson rather than the end of the world.
Sure.
And of course, as the years have gone by, I've gotten more money, been able to invest it back in, things have gotten easier. Like the biggest example was that first couple of years we didn't have irrigation and we were hand watering the entire high tunnel 3 or 4 hours a night, and they would drive by morning, and it was just so hot that summer. And a lot of things ended up just burning up, and they have a shade cloth, things like that.
Right.
So the next year I was able to, I bought irrigation and a shade cloth. The biggest difference ever.
Yeah.
So now we're on to the next thing that I know to learn as well.
So a little bit. So I think what's really awesome about, you know, you not only starting your own business right out of college, but also making it in native plants. It's sort of a niche area, but you made the decision to also give other UT students the opportunity to learn the skills and the trade as well. So can you want to talk about it
Yes.
a little bit?
I mean, what even really a thought? I think like on my graduation day, I was talking to John Boxingbro.
He's
I
the
think-
chair of the Department
Yes.
of Environmental Science at UT.
And I think he literally said to me, like, when you need interns, let us know.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll take one right now. From our very first year, we've had interns from UT. We started with one that first year. We had two or three over the season last year. This year, we already have 2 to 3 different. It's been so nice to see these kids that are taking the exact same classes that I took and all the same people I do. And I try to give them one of my pitches for our internship is that it's a really unique experience. I don't think you can, I mean, you can come to metro parks and stuff like that, but like a small business, small nursery, they don't just play with plants or play in a dirt all the time. I always tell them, you know, do you want to help me with the business or the marketing side? If that's what you're interested in, please tell me. I'll take all the help I can get anywhere, you know, and you can learn as well. So it's been amazing. I couldn't do it without the interns, that's for sure.
So what do you have heard any feedback from them about what the experience has been for them and how that's helped them in like their future?
Yes. So our first intern ever, she actually just finished at UT, but when she left, she was like, she was gonna move to New York, but she said, I'm gonna start my own greenhouse there. So definitely inspired her. And then 2 of our interns last year actually work in greenhouses and landscaping communities now. So they definitely got the bug for it. That's not what they wanted to do when they started. Great. And then by the end, that's what they end up doing. So I definitely think they find that they enjoy it.
Or that they can influence the businesses that they're working for.
They're trying.
Yeah.
They're trying, but sometimes, you know, what we all.
Well, and it's been my experience and talking to BBK, you have this too, is in talking to local greenhouse folks. They feel like native plants are expensive to bring in and then hard. They don't make a whole lot of money, right? And there's a rate of return. That's a business term, I know. Rate of return is not high enough to really justify it, and they do take a little extra care, right?
Well, they typically aren't going to grow like themselves. Not if you're going to be getting them from somewhere. That's not necessarily helpful for the plants you made and stuff.
So, Olivia, talk to us a little bit about that, because I'm sure, I know I've seen like proven winners, native plants. So talk to us a little bit about people who don't go to greenhouses might not realize, but proven winners is kind of like a brand, like you go and you buy Kraft mac and cheese, and you can get Kraft mac and cheese and stuff in different flavors, right? You can get proven winners as a perennial or annual plant,
Right.
And it's got a reputation. And they started doing sort of native
Yeah.
cultivars, so sort of because they're really called
Yes.
right?
Exactly. And that is something I find a lot with our customers. They love to tell me all the natives they've already bought and they've already put in. And I say, where'd you get them from? And it's usually Prairie Moon if I'm around the name drop places.
That's pretty good.
That's how it's supposed to. Yeah. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like we were just talking about. I always like to say it's not doing harm necessarily, I guess. It's doing more good than if you planted an invasive species. If that's the way you want to look at it. Yeah. So, but yeah, our nursery, we try really hard to focus on native genotypes as much as we can.
Right.
I mean, in this day and age, you can never know 100% or anything unless you work for the state or something.
Right. What genetics?
Yeah, we don't do that. Close as we can. We partner a lot with UT, Dr. Grail, and also Dr. Krantz at UT. That's when we get most of our seed, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
So, and then I know where those are coming from. That, you know, we don't buy our seed or wine from different places. And a lot of those times, you know, those seeds are coming from Minnesota or Wisconsin. It's quite the same.
It's interesting because Minnesota and Wisconsin were like far, far ahead of us in Ohio and even Michigan in terms of doing native plants on large scale. They were planting fields and fields and fields of big blue stem and little blue stem so that they would have a good deer habitat. You know, that was their main reason for doing a lot of that. But we have plenty of deer. Oh, we're not really worried about that. So they, again, when I first started out long ago, that was the only place to get seed was Wisconsin or Minnesota. And you were just happy you could find seed that was native.
Right. Yes.
But they were generally for really big installation.
Yes. And I guess it is turning positive because I did talk to the Michigan DNR about some lists they had of things that weren't truly native anymore because of the genotyping's gone.
Right.
One of those that I think is most shocking to people, and I try to tell people all the time, is purple cone.
Yeah.
Everybody loves a purple cone bar. And technically in Michigan, you are not legally allowed to sell that because it's not native anymore. The genotype is gone.
It's gone.
They're looking for it, but they haven't found it. So that always kind of shocks people when I say that.
So when we planted Sylvan Prairie, the first part we got of Sylvan Prairie Park was all farm field. And so it was pretty easy to install prairie on that right off the bat. And we got our stuff from Ohio Prairie Nursery, which is a wholesale seed company in Ohio, and they're in Highland. So we'll talk a little bit about genotype later, but when you're looking at genotype, or even like a local food, right? When we talk about the local food movement, 100 miles is pretty good. And so they're within our 100-mile circle. And then again, it wasn't Wisconsin or Minnesota, right? So we put the mix in, and it always looks terrible the first year and the second year. And then the third year, like, oh, okay, so year 4, guess what comes up? Purple cone flower. And I was like waiting because there are some people who are going to be really sticklers about that. Right. I was sure I would hear from somebody. Oh, I know. Yes. I think they all were like, Erica's doing her best. We talked a little bit about how having a native garden in your yard can be a stepping stone between larger landscapes, right? Olander Park and Sylvan Prairie. If we have neighbors who have native plants in between those two spaces, and they're just helping wildlife get from one to the other, right? Can you expand on that a little bit? And who wants to start?
Yeah, I guess I can start a little bit. We really, what can say, invertebrates and vertebrates and even pollinators, it's just everything that they need pathways to get to where they need to go. So when everything is fragmented by urbanization and just businesses going in, we kind of lose that real green ribbon of greenery and landscape that they have. So houses, we love to have fences and privacy fences and just our nice manicured landscaping, but it can be really hard for pollinators and birds to really have places to stay in the area. They can be confined to places or just have nowhere to go at all. So just even the few additions of some native species into your landscaping can just be an easy, nice resting point for even endangered species, like our real migratory birds that we have through Northwest Ohio. It's just such a popular tourism attraction that we have, and we're so lucky to have that in the Okoponis region. So we're just really creating those little corridors, those pathways, those little pocket prairies in our backyard, is just so everything can stop, rest, and be connected. Everything is connected, and through urbanization and stuff, it's not really connected as much anymore. So we're just kind of combat that. Yes, that's what our goals are.
And Kate, that's kind of what Wild One is working towards too, right?
Yes. Yeah. One other comment is in terms of providing the system services that birds in particular need in the spring, those migrating birds. Oak tree, if you want to plant one plant that's going to really support a lot of wildlife, and that's one oak tree, because there are so many insects that use oak trees, and then the birds will come and eat those insects, feed them to their young. But when they're migrating, birds really need that energy. And when they're raising their young in the spring, they need lots and lots.
Yeah, and acorns are huge food source for birds.
And there's bugs that live inside the acorns.
Yeah.
They'll eat the bugs that are in the acorns.
Yeah. And I think, the point I made before, but I'll make it again, is that as much as conservation organizations, we want to protect as much land as possible. Like, people still need places to live. right? So there needs to be a balance between natural areas and where, housing and the things people need. But if we can convince more businesses or homeowners to add native plant landscaping to their spaces, and that just it benefits our natural areas too, right? Because then there's more diversity between those two spaces, and the more diversity you have, and we've said this before, but the more diversity you have, the healthier the landscape is. It just makes everything better. I'm not going to get any more complicated than that. Right? It makes it better. So that's why those little things are important. And there's some great books. You talked earlier about Don't Tell Me, right? That kind of talk about why that's important and what kind of benefits and what you can find in your yard. So there's a lot of resources online, books that you can read and things online that you can find too. Yeah. Great. Thank you guys. That was really helpful. So one of the things that Dawson and I have both dealt with here at the park and some of our other installations is that we talk about the aesthetic of native plants is not for everyone, right? It doesn't look the way people expect. It can sometimes be a little bit messy. And so we've worked really hard to reduce that opinion. Kate, can you talk a little bit about how Wild Ones encourages people to either plant or maintain their installations to avoid that messiness?
So a couple of big tips are edging is always nice because it makes things just look neater. Like if you just have grass and then suddenly a big expanse of tall growing stuff, people are sometimes unclear. Did they just decide not to mow that side of the yard? Right. So the edging, or any kind of edging, just a nice clean edge is always
like mulch, right?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Yeah. And another big one is signage. There, so many organizations have signs about, planting for pollinators or, wild native plants for pollinators, that kind of thing. And just putting a sign out can help people understand what you're doing. And I think it makes even the maybe most curmudgeonly neighbor a little more receptive to the look of a native garden if they see that this is benefiting pollinators. And I think most people are happy with benefiting pollinators.
Yeah, right, exactly. Especially butterflies. Right. We talked a lot about insects, but that includes butterflies. So, you're going to see more butterflies. I don't know how people feel about moths, but they're pretty cool. And really cool other insects that come to your yard. We had this amazing garden at our old house that just had the coolest insects. I miss that garden, but we're working on it at our new house. When you have to talk to people about what plants to put in their yard and how to maintain, how do you help them kind of bridge that gap from that aesthetics?
Well, those are great points, Kate. Thank you. Yeah, like we touched on, it doesn't have to be a wild prairie. You don't have to turn your yard into a prairie. You could still have your more so traditional American flower bed that you want. Natives. Yeah. And the benefits that come with those natives. And that's what we really try to do. Like I mentioned, we do designs, and I really try to follow the aesthetically pleasing looking design that somebody would want. But of course, that's going to come with more maintenance.
Right.
So that's what we help with now that we have the maintenance and stewardship side of the nursery as well. But it's also getting people to see the beauty in that. We don't need a plant here and mulch around it, and a plant here and mulch around it. If it fills in this, that can be beautiful as well. We had a little story really quick. My grandparents owned a house in Blissfield with pure sand. So these plants just took off.
Yeah.
We had sawtooth sunflowers 10 feet tall. They unfortunately sold their house, and I said, please ask the buyers what they're going to do with those plants. And they said they hated it because it was so I thought it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. So they were going to rip them all out. And we were fortunate enough to go in there and get as much as we could out of there. But that was more of like a natural, tall planting. And now when we have customers more in cities, I always ask about HOAs because that's a whole other side of it. But we stay shorter, things that don't flop over like the New England asters, stuff like that. So it can be intentionally designed to be a little bit more traditionally manageable.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned this earlier. You can cut native plants back all the way up through end of June, early July, especially the lighter blooming ones.
Right.
And they will turn into just more shrubby. And I've done it just try it with any plant. Maybe it won't flower that year, and then the next year, okay, I can't cut it back.
Right.
or, maybe it'll get too brittle or whatever. So, but it's not going to kill the plant. Like you can do just about anything with a native plant. It's not going to kill it.
Yeah, we talk about how these plants evolve from bison and it's not only eating them, but also like stomping on them. So you can't really hurt them. So one of the gardens that we have here at Olander Park is right next to the office, and it's a rain garden that was an Eagle Scout project. And again, not a lot of plants available, so we kind of went with what we could get. And it's very tall. It's got ironweed and it's got cut plant in it, and I can't even remember what else. And so a couple of years ago, we did exactly what you talked about, Kate. We call it Chelsea Pop. And that's a term from England. I'm not going to give you the background on that. But, that allows it to, instead of being like 12 feet tall and falling on our cars, to only being 4 feet and, everything standing upright and not getting in everybody's faces. So, yeah. It's an aster where it's great with New England aster. Those fall blooming plants, it's a great way to manage them a little bit better. And when we talk about putting in native plants and sort of a traditional garden setting and how we have to weed around them, like, my vegetable garden, I have to weed. And so it's not really any different than that, right? If you have a garden, you're going to be weeding it. So it's just regular maintenance. I would listen to anybody that says that native plants are less maintenance, because that's not necessarily true. It depends on your aesthetic, what you're going for, right?
And there is no truly maintenance-free garden. The prairie is not maintenance. If it requires some maintenance.
Olivia, again, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to talk to you about what you're doing. And like I said, it's really exciting, first of all, to have a local native plant nursery, but also to have someone at your age. Now, that's ageist, I'm sorry, but to be passionate and willing to do it, because it's hard, right? Running your own business is hard anyway, and it is a lot of work. And you've picked a space that it can be challenging all in its very own way. So good for you. We're super excited. So the next thing we're going to do is talk to Kate. So Kate Mason-Wolf is someone I've known for a while, actually. And Kate, you have been involved in native plants, not just the propagation, like in landscaping, but tell me a little bit, because I didn't know this until I Googled you, about how involved you were at Metro Parks in terms of rare plant honoring. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I went through the Ohio Certified Volunteer Naturalist training in 2011, I think. And I started doing rare plant monitoring at Wildwood Metro Park. So for several years. Crazy. We actually have quite a few orchids growing at Wild.
Okay, I actually didn't know that. I should know that, but I didn't.
Anyway, we started doing that. And then eventually I started also helping out on the oak openings rare planting, which, as you can imagine, the oak openings Metro Park, significantly larger than Wildwood, much more natural habitat, a lot of rare plant populations there. So, and then the pandemic hit, and so they stopped doing plant monitoring for that year. And then we started up again the following year, but we cut back on Wildwood monitoring. So we're doing that like on a 3-year rotation. So we go out every Friday morning during the growing season. We have a list of rare plant populations. We go out and look for the populations that we know about, check on those populations, count the plants, notice if there's any really emergency need for invasive clearing or anything like that. We also help them report on how the native plants respond to burns and stuff. And then as we're out there, we might run across a new population of a plant. So so that's been really fun. I've learned so much. I am not a botanist. I took like one botany class in college. So I've been an avid gardener. So I kind of know how to identify, different things to look at to identify plants, but I definitely didn't know anything about native plants in particular. So I've learned so much from people like Denise Gehring and Diane Dionker.
Right.
And all the many, Jerry Jankowski, the many other people who have been involved in this for so many years.
So what was it about rare plant monitoring that you were like, oh, this sounds like fun?
Well, I love plants.
Okay.
And I started working at the Kinney Todd demonstration garden. It's an acid property. So, and I'm still doing that, maintaining that demonstration garden. And so I was really getting fascinated by native plants. I'd heard Doug Talany speak, so I was kind of getting bitten by the native plant bug. But I enjoy just getting to go into parts of the park where, off trail and places like we go on some of the corridor properties that aren't actually open to the public.
Mhm.
So, and it's just a really fun group of people.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really hot and mosquito-y and miserable, but most of the time it's great.
So, can you run through the different categories of plants that the state designates as a rare, threatened?
Yeah. So there's a group at the state level that meets that puts out a new list every 2 years. So there's potentially threatened, endangered, and extirpated. And we have some populations that are so endangered, like if there's only one plant in the entire, like one location in the entire state. And then the potentially threatened or threatened often are, and there are some that are endangered that are like so common in Northwest Ohio because of the oak openings.
Yeah.
And occur no place else in the state.
Right.
So we sometimes worry that if we count too many of these, are they going to take it off the list?
Right, yeah.
But because the oak openings is such a unique ecoregion throughout the state of Ohio, we often have plants that grow here that you're not going to find it.
So plants that the state has designated, we plant geeks talk about them as being listed. And so if you ever hear someone talk about a plant being listed, or like, for instance, Lucas County has the most listed state plants in the state compared to other counties in Ohio. That's what we're talking about, is the plants the state has designated as rare or threatened in some way. Right. And to some degree.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about how many state listed plants are at the South Oak Savannah, that's what we're referring to. They're on that list of rare or threatened or extinct. They wouldn't be there. Extirpated is kind of a fun term, right? Because that means that they were here and they're not here, but they might be somewhere else.
So, I mean, that's the thing about extirpated. It's like, well, we can't find it.
Right.
We're hoping we'll find it again in some time, but where it used to be, it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
And plants will move around, not as quickly as birds, especially if they move around.
Yeah. So one of my favorite things about Wild Ones, the Oak Openings region, is just the way that it engages people of all walks of life in native plant landscaping. I've been really involved with Wild Ones for a long time, not so much once I became the director, but for sure in the early days of the chapter for the Oak Openings. And we were able to get a decent following, but it's just exploded in the last 5 to 10 years, and it's awesome to see. So I'm really excited that we've got so many people who are so excited about native plant. That's so awesome. And you guys meet here at Olander Park in the Deer Hazard King Hall in the fall.
3 months. I mean, we started having meetings over Zoom or presentations over Zoom.
Yeah.
Obviously during the pandemic. And then we kind of had a mixture. Now we're pretty much going on back to all in person. We're not really doing much.
Yeah.
I think everybody got kind of burnt out on Zoom.
Yeah. That's nice to get home and watch those things, but
yeah. But do you ever? I mean, that's the thing.
You have to be somewhere at a specific time. You're going to be more likely to show up, put on your calendar.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your involvement in Wild Ones and what you really enjoy about it and how you feel the group has influenced the community in Northwest.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing that I do with Wild Ones right now is we have our Bloom Week plant sale, which Dawson mentioned. We also have a fall native plant sale. It's a GRI collaboration. Have talked about.
Well, we did talk about the Oak Openings Regenerative Initiative in our first episode, but yeah, it's a group of conservation organizations in Northwest Ohio whose focus is the conservation and preservation of the Oak Openings region, which is a globally rare ecosystem. So
we have growers, the Metro Parks, Toledo Metro Parks, outdoor Sylvania, Wood County Parks also contributes plants. Olivia used to, and now her business is doing so well. She doesn't have time and capacity, so that's wonderful. And we have a couple of other independent growers who are kind of doing more of not doing official retail, but just like growing native plants. And for right now, their biggest outlet to sell their plants is to our plant sales. So that's a great opportunity for them. And so that's the main thing that I do now. I got to be president right when the pandemic started. So that was an exciting time. But yeah, we got through that. So The other thing that I really love to do on behalf of Wild Ones is give presentations to local groups. I recently gave a presentation to the Bonneville Valley Herb Society.
Yeah.
And just talk about using native plants in your landscape. And, a lot of people have this idea that native plants get too tall, they're too messy, you can't have a nice manicured garden. So I like to talk to groups who are used to having really tidy manicured yards and gardens. Now, there are native plants you can use. Your gardens don't have to look like a prairie. You can still have plants. I mean, we bought our house in 2009 and it was beautifully landscaped with probably not a native plant in the beds, except for the oak trees that were there already. So I have taken out some of the non-native plants, but I've left a lot of non-native plants. I tell people if you don't have invasive plants in your garden, it's not the end of the world that you have non-natives, but putting native plants in amongst them is just such a huge benefit for the ecosystem. All of our little yards have to make up for the loss of natural habitat that's happening continually with urbanization, the suburbs being built. And so it's really up to each individual's backyard to provide the habitat that we need for birds, butterflies, and all of it.
Right. Survive. So Wild Ones, the one thing I really love about Wild Ones is, we have a chapter here. It was sort of started in Wisconsin, right? And it's been around for a while. So there's a lot of really great resources online for folks who are interested in learning about how to do native plants in their yards. And, it can be a little intimidating. As you said, right, you don't have to do all natives. Like, you don't be crazy like some of us who have done that and wholesale kill everything in your yard and then, put native plants in to replace them. And there's also, like Dawson was talking about, our New England aster. It is one of my favorites, but a lot of people don't like it because it flops over because it gets tall. But what you can do is just chop it off in June. And so, there's ways to maintain your garden so they kind of meet your expectations for aesthetics.
Right.
That you would really expect, whether it's where you plant the plant or how you treat it as it's growing. And a lot of that information can be found on the Wild Ones website. Just don't ever Google Wild Ones. You want to Google native plant landscaping and then look for Wild Ones.
Wildonesoakopenings.org. Wildonesoakopenings.org.
Perfect. So tell me a little bit, what do you think is the biggest benefit that people get out of being part of Wild Ones?
The information on the website is open to anybody, so you don't have to be a member. We have a free amount of educational information on the Learn tab on our website. And of course, our presentations are open to everyone. But we do have special features for members only. I think probably one of the most popular ones is that our plant sale is open both in the fall, spring and the fall, an hour early for members only. Come in and get the first choice or the first chance at getting the lupin, which is usually in short supply, right? The butterfly milkweed, which is the most popular thing. So I think that's one of the huge benefits for members that a lot of people really love. And we, during the summer, we'll have garden tours that are the gardens that have won Landscape Wild Ones gives out landscape awards every year. And so we usually try to organize at least 2 or 3 garden tours. And those are usually restricted to members just because we need to limit the size. So there are a few things like that.
Right.
And volunteers at the plant sale actually get a free plant for volunteering. So that's another big benefit.
And I always love the plant sales that you guys do because it's not a situation where you're walking in and if you don't know what you need or what you want, you can ask, right? There's always somebody who's willing to help. And I think, Liv, that's the advantage of having you as just doing native plants, right? Mm-hmm. People come into your greenhouse, they can say, this is what I have. And you can say, well, what kind of soil do you have? And how big of a space? And what's the sun? And so there's more help in those situations than there is if it was a retail situation with all sorts of plants. The folks who are working might not be able to help you as well with what kind of plants would be right for your space. And that's one thing that I think that Wild Ones talks about too, is the right plant, right place, right? Exactly. Because you want to not just think about what you think is nice, but you also you have to think about where you're putting it in your yard, and you do have to think about your neighbors a little bit, right? Because you don't want them to, you want to make friends. And quite honestly, the other thing that I think people forget is that if you don't like it, you can change it. Right. So it's not forever. Someone will either take that native plant off your hands, or you can go put it somewhere else. And it's not the end of the world. We have a native plant garden in the front of the office that we've redone 3 times now, right? And so just understanding, we even had sort of an evolution here at the park as we started putting native plants in. And also, we didn't have everything available in the beginning that we do now, or we collected seed somewhere along the railroad track and grew.
Learning. And all over the park here, we first installed our rain gardens. One of the big plants that came in those seed packets was cup plant. And it's fantastic for what it does with retaining water and everything like that. But it is not, it really just wants to take over, and it's so tall.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, we redid one of our rain gardens, and now we're going to be redoing that to kind of just get that cup plant out of there. It's a beautiful plant. You go to Sylvan Prairie, you get to see it in its glory, but in a confined space, it's not the best thing. So we're always learning. Right. There's nothing wrong with starting fresh or just giving them to someone else.
Yeah. I got cup plant as a gift. My little pocket curry. The first year it was great. It all grew up one, kind of in a line. I planted it kind of sporadically, and then all the flowers flocked over. And the next year, another row of them came up. And then, it's like, it's going to get to my house before it's just going to keep walking towards my house. Yeah. I was also going to comment, you were talking about how you have to change the native garden. And I feel like that happens in any garden, whether it's native plants or exotic plants.
Yeah.
Non-native plants, things change, things grow too big for the space they're in. I think that's I think people think, oh, native plants are so hard to control or whatever. And it's not any different than a non-native plant. And sometimes it's not as problematic, because sometimes non-native plants get way too aggressive and will take over your whole yard. Yeah. At least with native plants, they have their natural predators and they have their function in the ecosystem. They find a balance. The first year you plant a completely bare area, you see that black-eyed Susan is going to come up everywhere for the first couple of years. And then black-eyed Susan just calms down. Yeah. And the other plants have used that time to get established, and then they start to. And so, I used to panic when I first started trying to put stuff in. And the next year it was like, oh my God, I've got nothing but dense blazing star. And I try and get it out and give it to people. And now I realize, I should have just left that dense blazing star alone, because now I have hardly any. Because I was so worried about it not taking over my garden that I got rid of too much of it.
Yeah, and I think the other fun thing about it is how much it can change from year to year based on how it is, or how dry it is, or how hot or cold it was. And also that, those conditions benefit some plants over others. And so every year it's brand new. Right? You never quite get the same result twice.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun that way. But also, there's a lot of other activities going on this month. And so you'll be able to find that on the Openings Green Ribbon Initiative webpage. But who wants to give me their favorite native plants? What's your favorite?
To put in the landscape?
Any native plants.
Oh, gosh. Well, my mother lives in Sylvania. This is always a fun one. My mom lived in Sylvania, and we're getting some plants out of our beds here at Olander, and I dug up some prairie docks. These are going to look fantastic in her yard. And they actually do. Her neighbor, she's selling her house. My mom is selling her house, and her neighbor went up there and was like, can I take these when you move out? Yeah. So it's always about right plant, right place. You wouldn't think that something as crazy and awesome as prairie dock could work in Sylvania in a backyard, but it does if you put it in the right spot.
Yeah, they are going to get that out of there.
Yeah, that's a statement plant.
Yes.
And then some other real fantastic ones are blue vervain.
What's your favorite?
I bought a singular sawtooth sunflower a few years ago. And by that second year, I have bought 200.
Yes. Yes.
I love them so much. They're swimming covered in bees and the birds. And the smell, it's unlike anything I've ever smelled before. It's like lotion. It's the best way I can describe it, a natural lotion.
Yeah.
It's just so beautiful. I love it.
Right, you can.
I have all this.
Okay. I asked Mr. Todd, and he's like, which ecosystem are we talking about? Yeah, I know. How about this? And they'll be like, well, which one of those? So give me, what's your favorite today?
Well, today it's bloodroot.
Okay.
Because bloodroot's blooming.
Yes, I was going to mention that actually. That's one of our first harbinger of springs here in Northwest Ohio is bloodroot. And why don't you tell us? I know, but I'm going to let you tell us why it's called blood.
Because if you dig it up and you break open the root, it looks like saccharine.
Yes.
And I think it was also used medicinally for blood disorders.
Okay.
I think, but
Yeah.
I don't know that.
So, and that one's really a hard one. What I understand, you're the expert on this one's a hard one to propagate, right? The spring ephemerals, and that's what we call the spring wildflowers. So things like trillium, geranium is not hard. Trillium and Jack in the pulpit, right? Those are our spring wildflowers we see coming up. Well, not quite yet, but we're getting there. Are a little bit harder to propagate, and they have really specific conditions to grow in. So that makes them a little bit harder to grow in your yard.
Find the right place for them, which I have.
Yeah.
They are spreading a little. And the ants are the ones that the seeds are in, because they take the seed and then they take it to their anthill, whatever, nest, and they lick the eliasum off the seed.
Okay.
And that's what allows the seed to germinate after they've licked all that stuff off. So I had these little pockets of bloodroot coming up all over my backyard. It's because the ants keep
carrying them around. Yeah, that's cool. So a lot of times I'm guessing like you steer people towards plants that are easier to grow in your yard. So it's not so challenging right off the bat. Right. Yeah.
Yes.
There are a lot of really awesome plants that are not hard to grow and tolerate a lot of different soils and function really well for wildlife. So it's, yeah. My favorite, so I have bloodroot was going to, so I'll have to say that my favorite is hepatica actually. And it has more to do with the name than anything else. It's a beautiful purple flower, has a really cool leaf, but it's like say hepatic. All right. Well, thank you guys. This has really been a really great opportunity to chat with you guys and help everyone understand more about native plants. We all love growing them. Sometimes we can have a little bit of a blind spot about them and how great they are. I think, especially for folks who like birds and who like wildlife and like color, they're great plants to have. We always talk about how our gardens don't really start looking great until June probably. So right now they're a little bit rough because most of our gardens are late bloomers, so they start a little bit in June. But from June through September, man, they're rocking. So yeah. And Sylvan Prairie looks best in August, so great time to go out there. Thank you. Anything you guys want to add to what we talked about today, or things we missed, or?
No, I'll plug.
Yes, plug. Go ahead.
I'll plug Live Native Nursery. We do consultations. I know we were talking about getting like the expert advice, even though I hate calling myself an expert. There's still so much I don't know.
Sure.
But I help the best I can, and we come out to your site and look at it. And then we can also do designs for you, and then we can install that design. And then this year we are adding maintenance and stewardship to our services. We're very excited about that. We can do the whole thing for you. You never have to touch it if you don't want.
Well, I think that's really helpful, right? For people who are a little hesitant about what they want to do and what it should look like.
We've got a lot of demand for the maintenance, and that's why we're doing it. And some people, they say, I want to be out there with you, and you teach, and then next year I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to do that because they're just so worried I'm gonna pull it out. So I'm happy to teach. I'm happy to do it for you, whatever you would like.
Do you want to plug the plant sale?
16th, the Wild Ones Blue Week plant sale is May 16th and 17th at the Big White Barn in Blue Creek Metro Park in White House.
Yes, plant sale hours are 11 to 2, both Saturday and Sunday. And if you're a Wild Ones member, you can come early on Saturday to listen. The other thing you had mentioned on the Wild Ones website, and you talking about just garden design made me think of it. There also are on the Wild Ones webs, our site and the national site, our site links to the national site. Garden designs, one in particular for Toledo on Wild Ones National website. So that is a great way for somebody who has no idea what they're doing, and it's like sort of a regular suburban sort of yard that they used as a model with plant suggestions and, just general design idea. And then you go to live and you'll have a little, at least a little knowledge before you start, trying to talk to somebody.
Yeah, and start small too, right? Like, it's one of those things that you don't want to convert, half acre into native plants right off the bat.
You do not want to just stop mowing your lawn, which I hear people say that. I'm like,
it doesn't really work that. Yeah. And then I think this Wild Ones of Openings also have other plant sales listed on your website.
Yes.
Bowling Green, Wood County has their own plant sale.
Right. And then we have this on there. We have other local growers who you have to contact them to find out what they've got and when they need to get them from. So the Learn tab on the wildonesoakopenings.org website will tell you just about everything you need to know about how to get native plants. The other thing you had mentioned on the Wild Ones website, and you're talking about just garden design, and there's one in particular for Toledo on Wild Ones National List. So that is a great way for somebody who has no idea what they're doing, and it's like sort of a regular suburban sort of yard that they used as a model, with plant suggestions and just a general design idea. And then you can go live and you'll have a little more, at least a little knowledge before you start trying to talk to somebody.
Yeah, and start small too, right? Like, it's one of those things that you don't want to convert half acre into native plants right off the bat.
Do not let you stop mowing it, which I hear people say that. I'm like,
it doesn't really work that. Yeah. And then I think this Wild Ones of Openings also have other plant sales listed on your website. This Bowling Green, Wood County has their own plant sale. Right. Yeah.
And then we have laid this on there. We have other local growers who you have to contact them to find out what they've got and when they need to get them from them. So the Learn tab on the wildonesoakopenings.org website will tell you just about everything you need to know about how to get native plants.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much, you guys. I appreciate your time today. It was great to talk to you. All right, so that wraps up our episode on native plant landscaping. I hope we gave you lots of tools and tips on how to integrate native plants into your yard, even if it's on a small scale, and you just do one New England aster. The more homeowners we can get that are interested in engaged in doing native plant landscaping, the better it is for all of us. Thank you so much for your time today. Have a great afternoon.